Hello, my name's Darren Moore and I'm the Health and Safety Officer for Herne Bay Sailing Club. Sailing is great fun, but as we all know, it does come with some inherent dangers. So in this safety briefing, I'm going to explain what we can all do to reduce the risk of injury at the club. Please take the time to listen in and digest, and I'll try and make it as interesting as possible. Well, as interesting as health and safety ever is. It's basically audio only, so you can listen in while doing other things, but I slip in the odd photograph just to illustrate some of the points. The pictures, though, aren't essential, which is why you're mostly going to be seeing lots of nice photographs of dinghies sailing in the sunshine off of Herne Bay, which always makes us happier. And some of this information, I expect, may come across as a little bit obvious to the more experienced sailors amongst you, but bear in mind that the advice is designed for everyone, whether an old salty sea dog or otherwise. It's particularly important, however, that new members, students and visitors understand this information from the very beginning, because that reduces the risk of injury to everyone. And we're going to start out on the water. Most fundamentally of all, never underestimate the potential for drowning. I'm sorry to start on such a downer, but it does happen to recreational sailors. And our neighbours at Whitstable Sailing Club suffered such a tragedy in 2011. Because of this, don't enter the water unless you're confident in the murky depths, and always wear a correctly fitting buoyancy aid, in good condition and suitable for your weight while on the water or slipway. Always know the weather forecast and what the tide is doing, while remembering that weather at sea can change out of nowhere. Oh, and sailing where there's some possibility of thunder and lightning, well, that's never going to be a good idea, is it? Not with that big metal mast thing sticking out the top of your boat, almost designed to attract an electricity bolt. Dress appropriately for the weather that's occurring now, but also consider how the weather is forecast to change later. Remember that on a cold day, it tends to be even colder when out on the water, and being cold and wet can make you very cold indeed. So slip another layer on. Be aware of the signs of hypothermia in yourself or others. So that's shivering, looking pale, having cold and dry skin, blue lips, slurred speech, slowed breathing, tiredness, or confusion as a result of becoming too cold. If in doubt, go back to shore while you're still fit enough to do so, as hypothermia can quickly lead on to shock, or, as our paramedic friends like to call it, the departure lounge for death. And on the other side of the temperature spectrum, be aware also of the signs and symptoms of overheating, and so developing heat exhaustion and dehydration. So that's headaches and dizziness, confusion, high temperature, oddly enough, loss of appetite and feeling sick, cramps, fast breathing or pulse, and being very thirsty. Bear in mind also that the more dehydrated you are, the progressively weaker you become, while being less able to make reasoned decisions, like perhaps, well, I really should go back to shore now before I become more dehydrated. Remember also that sailing is associated with long-term sun damage to skin and eyesight, partly due to the sun bouncing off the water. So on sunny days, wear good quality water-resistant sun cream, and probably a lot more of it than you might feel necessary. Slap it on more and more as the day goes by, because it's probably been washed off. And consider wearing wraparound sunglasses and a decent sun hat to keep all those damaging ultraviolet rays from getting into your eyes. Another thing to consider, although not the nicest thing to discuss, is sewage. Sometimes, especially after spells of really heavy rain, sewage is discharged into the sea all along the coast, including Herne Bay, which can lead on to all kinds of nasty infections to the chest, ear, eye and skin, as well as stomach issues like E. coli and salmonella, and even hepatitis A. It's always good, therefore, to check the water state before going into the sea, especially in the day or so after heavy rain. There's plenty of apps available for this. I use Safer Seas and River Service, which describes all sewage discharges in the last 48 hours and will even auto-generate a complaint email to the water company on your behalf. Don't expect too much of a response though. And continuing the theme of infection, wear decent sailing footwear to protect your feet. Sailing barefoot looks wonderfully Saint-Tropez, of course, but it can easily lead on to cuts and infections to the feet. And sepsis, blood poisoning, well, it isn't very glamorous at all. In fact, it can be life-threatening. Within hours. Oh, and wear sailing gloves to help protect your hands from rope burns and other dangers on the boat. Consider protective headwear, like helmets or bump caps. You can get bump caps from DIY stores. to avoid being knocked unconscious by some boom with a mind of its own, or while being thrown headfirst against something hard during a capsize. And carry a sharp knife to cut ropes or sails should you become entangled in them during that capsize. It's good also to carry a rescue whistle for summoning help when in difficulties. Oh, and a compass should some sea mist come in and you find yourself disorientated. Just head south and you'll hit land, as opposed to north, which goes off to Essex, unless you want to go to Essex, or northeast if you want to go to Norway. But if you are going to Norway, then be careful of those Vikings. They can be rotters. Keep an eye out also for fishing lines, lobster pots and such like. That's another reason to carry a rescue knife. And beware of rocks and groins, especially at low tide. Study the pictures in the club which show where the most dangerous rocks are. Be confident in the use of your boat. Don't go out in it if you're unsure what you're doing, and especially on your own. If you've got doubts about your sailing ability or how your boat works, then seek advice from more experienced members. Don't just wing it. Get someone to go out with you for a test sail, or delay your maiden voyage until there's a safety boat out on the water to help you if it all goes wrong. And the club runs sessions on a Saturday morning for this very purpose. Be aware that if the wind is coming straight off the shore, then its full effects might be hidden by the cliffs. It may be a lot windier 100 yards out to sea than it appears when you're standing on the prom, wondering whether to go out or not. Don't be caught out. And make sure that your dinghy is seaworthy. Do you remember that old saying, if you're thinking about reefing your sail, then it's time to reef your sail? Well, in the same way, if you're thinking that some old rope or shroud might need changing, then it probably does, and will be a lot cheaper than the petrol burnt by the lifeboat coming out to rescue you as you float off out into the North Sea, feeling sorry for yourself. And while you're checking your dinghy, look out for any sharp objects, blocks maybe, that have become knackered, cheese wire like shrouds with nasty pins sticking out of them which should be taped up before they scar you for life when you wrap yourself around them in some unexpected jibe. And don't forget to put your bung in, or check to see whether someone else has borrowed it should you leave the bung in when not using the boat. Be aware that the slipway is indeed slippery at any time, but especially so when wet or if covered in seaweed or other marine life. It's also full of small slats that can trip you up, especially if you're a child or you've got small feet. Don't run on it. In fact, do yourself a favour and just keep away from the slipway unless you've got a good reason for being on it. Hopefully this won't come across as too obvious, but there's also dangers of jumping from the side of the slipway into the water, as there may be all kinds of unseen hazards under the surface. So don't jump off the side of the slip or allow your children to do so. Appreciate that gaps can sometimes develop on the slip in heavy weather as sections shift position or are even washed away, and if hidden underwater may only come to notice when you fall down them, your boat loyally following you as you fall into that gaping hole. Take a moment, therefore, before using the slipway to visually check it for any gaps or damage, especially if you're first down the club that day. If you discover any gaps or damage, then immediately carry out the slipway damage procedure, which is described on the Health and Safety Board, before somebody gets hurt. Launching dinghies and safety boats also provides us with a lot of opportunity for hurting ourselves. Make sure that your dinghy is as depowered and as head to wind as practical, and take it slow, especially if the slipway is wet. Do a final check on the prom before going down the slip to confirm that your ropes are untangled and uncleated and that your boom is free to move with the wind. If it's a busy day, then go down the side of the slip furthest from the wind, the leeward, so that your boom, flapping with the wind, sticks out over the edge away from everyone, and so doesn't injure some sailor that's bringing a trolley back up the slip. When going down the slip, communicate clearly with whoever you're working with, and be aware of the dangers of being trapped under the boat, or caught between boats and trailers, or just comically falling over the side of the slipway. It sounds simple, but always know where the edge of the slipway is. It's also a good idea to keep an eye on the sea, because those big waves come out of nowhere. Work with others at the bottom of the slipway to avoid congestion. Assist the person 2 boats down from you with launching and take their trolley for them, whilst arranging for someone else further up the queue to do the same for you. Have a plan ready for sailing away from the slipway and do so as quickly as you can. If, though, you realise that you need to make some adjustment to your dinghy, it always happens, then walk your boat around to the beach if the sea's calm enough, as opposed to blocking the bottom of the slip. You'd be less danger to others that way. Don't leave your trolley on the slip at busy times. If it's quiet, then you can do, but leave it on the windward side, one wheel over the edge, and as out the way as possible, as that cuts down the chances of other boats getting snagged up on it. When wishing to land, think carefully beforehand about how you're going to do it, and have an escape plan ready for if it all goes wrong. Decide how and when you're going to depower your boat, especially if the wind is coming straight onto shore. Check for fishermen and people swimming, and especially kids close to the slip. If you anticipate that another sailor, through inexperience or the type of dinghy they have, is going to have more difficulty landing, then give them space to do so safely. It's always good fun to watch anyway. And discuss at length in the bar afterwards. If, however, you're the inexperienced sailor, then stay offshore for a bit and watch how others are approaching the problem. You might want to copy their example. Don't assume that everybody else knows which launching trolley is yours. Pop a label on it. Confusion over trolleys leads to delays at the bottom of the slip, which in turn increases the chances of you getting hurt whilst waiting there. Those waves crashing around you, your dinghy wanting to sail off for another spin around the bay. Having got the boat depowered and out the water, then take it easy as you pull it up the slipway. Try to appreciate that you may be a lot stronger, a lot fitter, and a lot fresher than the person you're working with. And injuries can easily occur when two people are working at different speeds. Slow and steady beats someone ending up on their bum or having their teeth knocked out when flying forwards. So, always consider the physical abilities of the person that you're working with and talk to each other. The same goes when manoeuvring boats or other awkward and heavy objects on shore, especially those heavy slipway sections. Make sure that you've got enough people and don't rush. Follow the guidance for heavy lifting displayed in the club, because we're not into creating any more work for physiotherapists than is really necessary. Don't operate the club winch unless you've been instructed in its use. Be careful not to trip on the winch rope or any other trailing ropes, and keep an eye out for pedestrians or cyclists in danger of doing the same. Don't walk or stand behind the safety boat as it goes down the slipway, or any of the larger, heavier dinghies for that matter. And if you use the hose pipe, don't abandon it afterwards where someone else is going to trip over it. When out on the water, take care not to collide with other boats, so comply with the RYA rules of the road, but also keep good observations for swimmers and other water users who won't appreciate being run over by you. Know your capsize and entrapment drills, as described in the club, and keep an eye out for wash from powered boats, which may result in you having to practice those drills. It can be very alarming when you first find yourself in the water and trapped under a sail. Your first reaction should be to put your hand up over your head and create an air gap. And consider using a masthead flotation device to stop your dinghy inverting in the first place. Our sailing area is very shallow, so there is some danger of your masthead getting stuck on the sea bottom if you're having a bad day. And if the tide is running fast, then it can push that masthead even further into the mud, which makes your day even worse. Remember that powered boats are pushed through the water by fast-spinning, muscle-mincing propellers, and that some people are less skilled than others in piloting these craft. While the club safety boat crews are trained to manoeuvre their ribs to keep their propellers away from you, other boat users coming to your assistance, if you've capsized for example, may be less able, especially if they're a little bit overexcited, let's say, in their desire to rescue you. So keep away from the dangerous end of their boat, the bit where the propeller is, that they've forgotten to put into neutral. If you're using a trapeze harness, then make sure that it's well maintained and that it's got a modern quick release system, and that you understand how to use it safely before entering the water. Some of these harnesses can be really complicated when you've never used them before. Whatever you do, don't go using some 1980s death trap of a harness that somebody's lent you and would be a real nightmare to get unhooked from when it's all going wrong and you're in the water. It will scare the life out of you. Be aware of the danger of dinghies being scattered through bad weather, and that the safety boats operate a policy of recovering sailors before dinghies. They may tag your boat and leave it capsized if they need to rescue somebody else. Another club policy to know is that if the safety boats are on the water for a structured event, like racing or training, they will stick with that racing or training, and so might not be monitoring you when you go off with some free sailing. It's best to let them know what you're doing. And if you find yourself being transported in a safety boat, then hold on tight to avoid falling out the back where that nasty propeller is. If you decide to go sailing midweek perhaps, when you're the only person down the club, and so less likely to be observed if it all goes wrong, then follow our safety advice for lone sailing. The same goes for day cruising, kayaking, paddle boarding, and cold water swimming. The advice is all there in the club handbook, and it's designed to keep you as safe as possible. Now let's talk about dangers when off the water. Position and manoeuvre your dinghy on the prom so as to present the least risk possible to others. So that's going to be head to wind, out the way as much as possible, and as depowered as practical. Be aware that non-sailors using the prom don't always realise that booms can swing from side to side or even bother looking where they're going. If you finish sailing for the day, then drop your mainsail as soon as you can. Don't leave gear around where someone is going to trip over it. And before moving your boat, take a good look around for cyclists, pedestrians, rollerbladers, dogs, whoever. And if you're anywhere near a safety boat parked up on the prom, then be careful not to trip on a chock holding the wheels or a hose connected to the engine. Be very careful when stepping and unstepping masts. Falling masts can cause serious injury, so check around you for people likely to be poleaxed by your mast as it lands on their head. If you need help stepping and unstepping your mast, then just shout up. Don't risk doing it on your own. And on the subject of masts, we occasionally have issues where local little cherubs unclip shrouds and forestays. So check them when rigging your boat and tape them up so it doesn't happen to you. Don't leave anything on floors within the club where it might reasonably trip somebody up. And if you see a trip hazard, hey, that's a good health and safety term, isn't it? Then please do something about it. Carrying on the theme of slips and trips, avoid dripping water from yourself or clothing onto floors within the club, where it can create a slip hazard for others. And if you see a puddle of water which might cause danger, then please dry it up. There's plenty of blue towels around. Oh, and be careful not to slip when using the showers. Of course, this wouldn't be a proper safety briefing without a reference to ladders, step ladders, and working at heights. So, if anything you do at the club involves using a ladder or a step ladder or working at heights, then please take a look at our safety guidance in the club handbook. And it's a thrilling read, as you might imagine. When in the galley, be aware of all those usual dangers like sharp knives, heating equipment, chemicals, and other hazards associated with a kitchen environment. And for that reason, children under 12 are not allowed in the galley unsupervised. Please discuss with the galley or bar staff any allergy concerns that you have about food and drink provided at the club, whilst being aware that there is a fine tradition of members bringing in cakes, curries, and other foods from home for the enjoyment of members. And it's very hard for us to guarantee exactly what ingredients have gone into them. So, if you have any particular allergy issues, then it might be best to play safe and leave these items alone. Put down that brownie. Make yourself aware of the location of the club first aid bags and the defibrillators for use during cardiac arrest. The defibrillators are designed to be used, if necessary, by someone with no medical training at all. In fact, they're designed to be used by someone who's never even seen a defibrillator. So don't go thinking that you're not allowed to use it because you haven't been trained or something. If you use it properly, and it does start speaking to you as soon as you open the flap, telling you exactly what it wants you to do, then you might, quite literally, save someone's life. Because a person in cardiac arrest will probably die within 10 minutes, if not defibbed. And it's unlikely that we're ever going to get an ambulance to the club within that time. Also, the defib is so clever that it won't give someone an electric shock unless it decides that the person needs it. So you can't do someone any harm by attaching the pads to them, only good. Have one of the first aiders show you how the defib works if you're unfamiliar with it, and watch the videos on the club website. However, and this is a big however, don't defib someone when they're soaking wet, perhaps because they've just been pulled out of the sea. High voltage electricity and water don't work terribly well together. So cut away the clothing and quickly dry off their chest with a towel before attaching any pads. And make sure that they're not laying in a puddle of water or something. Ideally, lay them on a dry towel. But, as I say, you need to do these things quickly because a person in cardiac arrest, I repeat, will probably die within 10 minutes if they're not defibbed. If a medical emergency or anything that appears to you to be a serious incident occurs at the club, then call 999 using the landline phone. Mobile coverage tends to be useless at the club, doesn't it? And then carry out the Emergency Action Plan for Major Incidents and Serious Injuries procedure, which, you'll be glad to know, is described on the notice board right next to the phone. All you need to do is follow the instructions which are written out for you. Moving on. Remember that the club safety boats use petrol, so be careful if smoking close by one that you don't ignite some fumes. I doubt the sailing committee would be terribly impressed if one of their precious ribs went up in smoke. And, on the subject of fires, be careful when using the club gas barbecues. If you're unsure how to use them, then seek advice first. We don't want you blowing yourselves up, or the club for that matter. If unlocking the boathouse, place those heavy scaffold bar locks that secure the main doors in a position where they won't fall over and cause injury to someone. Oh, and turn the lights on when first entering the boathouse so that you can see where you're going, because there's plenty of things to trip over in the gloom there. The lights are right by the entrance door. Take a moment when you're next down the club to familiarise yourself where the fire escapes and extinguishers are. It might prove useful sometime, although hopefully not. And remember, there's a no smoking policy at the club. You still with me? Good. Be careful when using steps at the club, especially when loaded down with gear. Note that the deck boards on the sun decks may become slippery when they're wet. Please don't sit on the sun deck banisters in case you fall over the side. Don't take that shortcut across the rough grassy area above the mirror park between the laser store and the clubhouse, as there is some danger of falling down into the mirror park itself, probably head first. And if you have small children, don't allow them to play in this area. Oh, and supervise them generally around the club, especially on the slipway. Again, don't allow them to sit on the sun deck banisters or use the dinghy or kayak racks as a climbing frame. And in general terms, remember that all children at the club under 18 need to be supervised by an adult. And even if you are the adult, then please take care when climbing on any of those kayak or dinghy racks. And in a final reference to climbing, don't go climbing on the roof of the club or boathouse. Do we need to say this? Even if you do want to free up a sticky halyard or fit a wind indicator or wash off all the mud from your masthead because you did one of those full invert capsizes that we were discussing earlier. You can probably guess that I've done all of these things myself in the past, which is why I'm asking you not to. Anyhow, you'll be glad to know that we're soon coming to the end of this safety briefing, and thank heavens for that, you might say, and I'm right there with you. I never realised that being down Herne Bay Sailing Club could be so hazardous. Realistically, we can't stop all accidents occurring at the club, but we can work with each other to keep that number as small as possible. And so that brings me to a couple of closing points. If you see something that's clearly dangerous but can be sorted out there and then please do so. We're all sensible people and need to look after each other. A lot of this is just common sense, isn't it? As I'm sure you've worked out for yourself. If, however, it's more of a long-term issue, maybe in the fabric of the buildings or the way that we do stuff as a club, then let me know and maybe we can get things changed. Speak to me at the club or send me an email via the address on the Health and Safety Board. And finally, if you do suffer an injury or a near miss, then tell us about it by recording the details in the accident book. That way we can assess whether anything needs doing to stop it happening to somebody else. And a final thing. Please read the limitation of club liability notice on the Health and Safety Board under section 23 of the club constitution. I won't read it all out here as it is a bit wordy and I've probably bored you enough already, I suspect. And there you are, the notice has just flipped up on the screen. But it basically says that the club won't accept liability for injury unless somehow at fault, which is another reason why we all need to look after each other. Anyhow, thanks for listening. Check out the health and safety section in the club handbook for more advice. And most importantly of all, happy, safe sailing. Bye-bye.